The moment I handed my resignation letter to Mr. Hastings, he smiled smugly. He thought he had won. What he did not know was that this letter held a secret that would change everything. Something I had kept hidden for far too long. 2 months ago, I was the most dedicated employee at Whitmore Consulting. My days started early, my nights ended late, and I put my heart into every project. I had been with the company for 5 years, and promotions were usually based on seniority and performance. I was certain that this year, I would be next in line. Enter Derek. He joined the team a year ago, and quickly made a name for himself. Not because of his work, but because of his charm. Derek had a knack for saying the right thing at the right time. He rarely met deadlines, took credit for group work, and avoided any task that required real effort. Yet somehow he was the office favorite. Even Mr. Hastings, our department head, could not seem to resist Derek's charisma. Despite Derek's behavior, I stayed focused. Our most important client, Westcorp, had a new project, and I was put in charge of the presentation. For weeks I prepared. I fine-tuned every detail, triple-checked the data, and rehearsed until I could present it flawlessly. When the day arrived, I gave it everything I had. I felt the energy in the room shift. Westcorp's representatives were impressed, and I knew I had nailed it. But Derek had other plans. During the meeting's closing minutes, he stepped in and casually pitched an idea, one that I had mentioned during an earlier brainstorming session. It was nothing more than a footnote in our discussions, but he sold it like it was the centerpiece of the presentation. I could barely contain my frustration. He had hijacked my hard work and twisted it to make himself the hero. Mr. Hastings beamed with pride as he praised Derek for his brilliant innovation. I felt invisible. A week later, I walked into the office expecting a long-overdue promotion. Instead, Mr. Hastings announced that Derek had been given the role of senior consultant. The room erupted into polite applause, but my world went silent. I waited until the crowd dispersed before confronting Mr. Hastings in his office. "You know I deserve that position," I said, keeping my voice steady despite the fury boiling inside me. Mr. Hastings leaned back in his chair, a faint smirk playing at the edges of his lips. "You are talented, but Derek is a visionary," he said, waving his hand as if that explained everything. "You need to learn to be more adaptable." That was it. I had spent years pouring everything into this job, and now I was expected to be more adaptable. No amount of hard work would change the fact that Derek had the upper hand. I spent the next few days in deep contemplation. It was not just about the promotion anymore. It was about how much I had sacrificed for people who did not appreciate me. My mind made up, I typed up my resignation letter. But this was no ordinary letter. I made sure it carried weight, a truth that would expose everything Mr. Hastings had tried to hide. I placed the letter on his desk that morning, and I waited for the storm to begin. The office was unusually quiet that morning. Most of the staff had gathered in the break room to celebrate Derek's promotion. I sat at my desk, listening to the distant hum of conversation and laughter. It was the sound of people too blind to see what was really happening. Mr. Hastings called me into his office an hour later. I stepped inside, finding him seated behind his dark oak desk with my resignation letter spread open in front of him. His expression was unreadable, but I could sense the tension radiating off him. "Closing out your time here with dramatics, are you?" he said with forced casualness, tapping a pen against the paper. "I would not call it dramatics. Just honesty," I replied. The letter was straightforward, detailing all the times I had been sidelined or had my ideas stolen. But it also included something far more damning: documentation of several ethical violations I had uncovered. For months, I had noticed discrepancies in our financial records. Projects we never completed were listed as closed with payment. Expenses were inflated, and clients were being billed for services they never received. I knew it was not an innocent mistake. It was fraud, plain and simple. I had spent weeks gathering evidence, careful not to alert anyone. The files were thorough, with timestamps and correspondence that left no room for doubt. And I knew exactly who was responsible: Mr. Hastings. He had used Derek's charm as a smokescreen to keep everyone distracted while he manipulated the books. Mr. Hastings leaned forward. "I hope you realize what you are insinuating here. These are serious accusations." Unfounded ones, I might add. They are not unfounded, I said, my gaze steady. I have every document to back up my claims. And I have already sent copies to our compliance department. For the first time, I saw the cracks in his composure. His eyes narrowed, and his knuckles whitened as he gripped the edge of his desk. You think you are clever, do you? Trying to sabotage me on your way out, he hissed. But this will ruin you too. No one hires a whistleblower. I felt a flicker of fear, but I refused to back down. Then that is a risk I will take. At least I will leave with my integrity intact. The tension in the room was suffocating. Neither of us spoke for several moments. Fine, he finally said, forcing a tight smile. You have made your point. You are angry, but there is no need to be hasty. Let us discuss this like professionals. I am not interested in negotiation, I replied firmly. His smile dropped. You will regret this. I turned to leave, but Derek was waiting just outside the door. He must have overheard the conversation, because his usual smug confidence was gone, replaced by unease. Everything all right? He asked, but his voice lacked its usual charm. Mr. Hastings waved him inside, shutting the door behind them. I walked back to my desk, my heart pounding. The battle had only just begun. By midday, a flurry of emails started flooding my inbox. Compliance had launched an investigation. They were reviewing every file, every email, and every financial record Mr. Hastings had ever touched. And they were doing it with urgency. Word spread fast. Conversations died down when I passed by, and curious glances followed me everywhere. Derek avoided eye contact altogether. The golden boy was finally feeling the pressure. But I knew this was not over. Mr. Hastings would not go down without a fight. By the end of the day, the office was a pressure cooker ready to explode. Mr. Hastings had been in and out of meetings with the compliance team, his face growing more strained with each passing hour. Derek's usual bravado had evaporated, leaving him pacing nervously by the water cooler. I was at my desk, pretending to focus on old reports, when a firm knock sounded on the glass wall of my cubicle. It was Lauren, the head of compliance. Her sharp gaze left no room for interpretation. This was not a social call. We need you in the conference room, she said. I followed her, every eye in the office watching me as I passed. When I entered the room, Mr. Hastings and Derek were already seated, their expressions a mixture of frustration and fear. A few other members of senior leadership sat silently, their faces grim. Lauren began without preamble. We have thoroughly reviewed the evidence provided in your resignation letter, she said, addressing me directly. The findings are significant. Mr. Hastings leaned forward. This is a misunderstanding. I have managed this department for 10 years without incident. There is no need to drag this through an audit. Lauren cut him off. There is no misunderstanding, Mr. Hastings. The records are clear. You authorized fraudulent charges on at least 5 major client accounts, totaling hundreds of thousands of dollars. And you manipulated invoices to inflate company earnings during our last quarterly report. The room went cold. Even though I knew what the investigation would reveal, hearing it spoken aloud made it feel all the more real. Mr. Hastings tried to regain control. This is absurd. You are taking the word of a disgruntled employee. Do not insult my intelligence, Lauren snapped. This is not just one person's word. We have the documents, timestamps, and emails. There is enough evidence here to warrant criminal charges. Silence followed. For a moment, Mr. Hastings looked like he might deny everything. But he must have realized the futility. Instead, his eyes shifted to Derek. It was his idea, he said suddenly. Derek suggested the adjustments to the accounts. He wanted to make the numbers look better for the board. What? Derek shot up from his chair, his face pale. You are blaming me? I had nothing to do with it. Oh, please, Mr. Hastings said bitterly. You were happy to play along as long as it meant promotions and pay raises. They turned on each other in an instant. The air filled with accusations and denials, each man scrambling to save himself. But Lauren's expression remained cold and unmoved. We will sort out who is responsible for what, she said. For now, both of you are suspended pending further investigation. Security will escort you out. 2 uniformed guards stepped into the room. Mr. Hastings and Derek were led away, their protests echoing down the hall. When they were gone, Lauren turned back to me. You could have just walked away. Why did you stay to expose all of this? I hesitated before answering. Because I could not stand by and watch good people be taken advantage of. I may not have gotten the promotion, but I deserved better. So did everyone else. Lauren studied me for a long moment before nodding. Your integrity is commendable. We will need to appoint someone to lead this department until we can restructure it. I would like to offer you the interim leadership position. The weight of the day lifted, replaced by a cautious sense of hope. I would be honored, I said, my voice steady. As I left the conference room, the entire office seemed to shift. The whispers had stopped, replaced by something else, respect. For the first time in a long while I felt seen. The days that followed were a whirlwind. With Mr. Hastings and Derek gone, the entire department went into damage control mode. Compliance worked tirelessly to repair the damage done to client relationships. And I was at the forefront of every effort. Though the transition was not without its challenges, there was a noticeable change in the atmosphere. Colleagues who once seemed distant now approached me with questions, ideas, and a genuine sense of collaboration. The weight that Mr. Hastings and Derek had cast over the office had lifted, and in its place was a new energy, a shared determination to rebuild trust and integrity. Lauren scheduled regular updates with me, and during one of our meetings, she delivered news that was both relieving and satisfying. The investigation is wrapping up, she said. Mr. Hastings is facing formal charges for fraud, and Derek will be blacklisted from any management positions within the company. We cannot undo the damage they caused, but we can ensure they will not hurt anyone else here. I nodded, feeling a sense of closure settle over me. The anger and frustration that had driven me to write my resignation letter were no longer the forces that defined me. In their place was a renewed confidence in my own value. A week later, the CEO called an all-hands meeting. The room was packed, and there was an air of anticipation as he stepped up to the podium. Today, I want to acknowledge someone who has demonstrated extraordinary courage, integrity, and leadership, he said. Without their actions, we might never have uncovered the deception that was undermining this company. It is with great pride that I announce the promotion of our new senior consultant and interim department head, Alex Carter. Applause filled the room. For a brief moment, I was overwhelmed. This was the recognition I had worked for, not just for my efforts, but for standing up when it mattered most. As the crowd dispersed, I stayed behind for a moment to soak in the moment. Derek's empty desk was a reminder of the past, but it no longer held power over me. One of my closest colleagues, Emily, approached with a smile. You earned this, she said warmly. We all saw it, even if it took management a little longer. I smiled back. Thank you, Emily. It means a lot. The future felt open and full of possibilities, and for the first time in years, I knew I would be walking into it on my own terms. Integrity had won, and I was ready to lead. 6 months had passed since the day I exposed the fraud. The office, once a place of constant tension and hidden power plays, had become a collaborative and energized environment. Trust had been rebuilt, and every team member contributed openly, knowing their work would be recognized and valued. As the interim department head, I focused on transparency and accountability. New reporting protocols ensured every project was monitored accurately, and an anonymous feedback system empowered employees to voice concerns without fear. These changes, small yet significant, shifted the entire office culture. One afternoon, I was deep in reviewing a new client proposal when Lauren appeared at my door with a folder. I have something for you, she said with a rare, approving smile. I opened the folder and found an offer letter for the permanent department head role. My breath caught as I read the terms. You earned it, Lauren said simply. Not just because of what you uncovered, but because of how you handled the aftermath. People trust you. Her words carried more weight than any title ever could. I signed the offer on the spot, feeling a deep sense of pride and gratitude. Later that evening, as I packed up my things, a familiar figure appeared near the lobby. Derek. Gone was his usual confident swagger. His shoulders were slumped, and his once polished appearance was now disheveled. I heard about your promotion, he said, avoiding eye contact. Congratulations. Thank you. I replied, my tone measured. He shifted awkwardly. I came to apologize. For everything. It was easier to take shortcuts than to put in the effort. And I realize now how much I destroyed. Not just my own career, but the trust of everyone around me. His words were unexpected, and for a moment, I felt a twinge of pity. But I knew I could not absolve him of his choices. Apologies are a good start, I said. But rebuilding trust takes time. What matters now is what you do next. He nodded slowly, understanding the weight of my words. Without another word, he turned and walked out the door. As I stepped outside, the sun was setting on the horizon. A gentle breeze swept through, bringing with it a sense of calm and clarity. My journey had not been easy. It had begun with betrayal and disappointment, but it had evolved into something far greater. A story of resilience, integrity, and the courage to stand up for what was right. And as I looked toward the future, I felt ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. My time to lead had truly begun.